The drone drifted through the cold darkness of space for 3,000 years before it found anything interesting. It was old technology by Galactic Council. Standards, a simple machine with simple orders, scan, record, report. It had passed through 100 dead systems and found nothing but rocks and gas and silence. Then it entered a small yellow star system on the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm. The drone sensors detected something unusual on the third planet. From the sun, radio waves, millions of them, chaotic and overlapping and filled with strange sounds and stranger images. The drone recorded everything and sent its report across the vast network of relay stations that connected the civilized galaxy. The report arrived at the Council's great archive on the world, called Nexus Prime. A junior analyst named Kira was the first to review it. She was a member of the Hollow, a species of tall and thin beings with skin like blue glass. She watched the recordings with growing confusion. Creatures on this planet looked soft and weak. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armor, yet they dominated their world completely. K-Thra flagged the report for senior review. Within a cycle, it reached the attention of the Galactic Council itself. The Council chamber on Nexus Prime was ancient beyond measure. 12 species had built it together in an age when cooperation seemed like the path to eternal peace. Now those same species used it mostly to argue about trade routes and border disputes. The great ideals of the founders had faded into memory and then into myth. Ambassador Velrix of the Dominion read the report with his 4 eyes moving independently across the data streams. The Dominion were the oldest and most powerful members of the Council. They had conquered 1,000 worlds before the other species learned to make fire. Velrix himself was over 800 years old. He had seen countless primitive species discovered and catalogued and forgotten. This one seemed no different. They call themselves humans, Velry announced to the assembled ambassadors. They have achieved basic nuclear technology and primitive space flight. They have placed a few small stations in orbit around their planet and sent simple probes to their neighboring worlds. Threat assessment, asked Ambassador Urex of the collective, a hiveman species that spoke through specially grown biologic units. None, Velrix replied. They are centuries away from developing faster than light travel. They have no unified government. In fact, they seem to spend most of their time fighting themselves. The chamber filled with the sounds of amusement from a dozen different species. The idea of a species waging war against itself seemed absurd to beings who had long ago solved such problems. They fight over resources. Ketra explained. She had been summoned to present her analysis. Land, water, fuel. They have not yet learned to harness the power of their star efficiently. They burn ancient organic matter for energy. More sounds of amusement. The Galactic Council had mastered fusion power so long ago that the old method seemed like something from a primitive nightmare. Recommendation, Velrix asked. Standard quarantine protocol, Cathra suggested. Place monitoring stations at the edge of their system. Wait for them to develop to a point where contact becomes necessary. Perhaps in 500 years, perhaps 1,000. Velik considered this. It was the standard approach, the safe approach, but safety was not always profitable. I have a different suggestion, he said. Their world is rich in deuterium. Their oceans contain enough fuel to power our fleets for 10,000 years. I propose we harvest it. Harvesting meant extraction on a planetary scale. It meant draining the target world's oceans to fuel the great machines of the Dominion. It was legal under council law, but only for uninhabited worlds. Ambassador, I said carefully, the planet is inhabited. 8 billion individuals, according to the survey. Pre-emergent individuals, Valerie corrected. They have no representation in this council. They have signed no treaties. They have no legal standing. Under galactic law, they are simply animals who happen to use tools. That seems harsh, said Ambassador Mox of the Gentle Ones, a species known for their diplomacy and compassion. They are clearly intelligent. They have art, music, literature. They dream of reaching the stars. Many species dream. Velrix replied coldly. Few achieve. These humans are divided against themselves. They build weapons capable of destroying their civilization and point them at each other. They are a species in the process of self-destruction. We would simply be accelerating the inevitable. And what if the humans themselves, Mox pressed, those who survive the extraction process can be relocated to mining colonies in the outer systems? They seem sturdy enough for manual labor. We would be giving them purpose. The debate continued for several cycles. Some ambassadors raised concerns about the ethics of the proposal. Others worried about the precedent it might set. But in the end, the vote came down to simple mathematics. The Dominion controlled 40% of the Council's military power. Their allies controlled another 30%. When Velrix called for a vote, the motion passed easily. Only Ambassador Mox voted against it. This is wrong, Mox said as the chamber emptied. We know nothing about these humans. We have not spoken with them. We are condemning an entire species based on a single survey. Drones report. Velrix paused at the doorway, his 4 eyes focused on Mox with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. I have lived for 800 years, he said. I have seen 100 species rise and fall. They are all the same in the end. They fight, they destroy, they consume. The strong survive and the weak become fuel for the strong. This is the way of the universe. These humans are weak. Therefore they will become fuel. He left without another word. The harvest armada assembled over the next cycle. 300 vessels, harvesters and warships, and transport craft. It was far more force than necessary for a species with no space fleet and no allies. But Velrix believed in overwhelming power. It sent a message. It eliminated variables. The fleet departed Nexus Prime with great ceremony. The citizens of the Council worlds watched the broadcasts and felt pride in their civilization's power. They did not think about the 8 billion souls who would lose their world. Those souls were not people to them. They were simply resources waiting to be collected. Commander Thex of the Dominion stood on the bridge of the flagship, inevitable as it entered faster than light travel. She was young for a Dominion officer, only 300 years old. But she had earned her position through skill and ruthlessness. She had overseen 12 harvest operations. None had presented any significant challenges. This one would be no different. She was certain of it. The journey took 4 standard cycles. When the fleet emerged from faster than light travel at the edge of the human system, FEX ordered a full scan. The results confirmed the survey drone's report. Primitive satellites, a few small stations, chemical rockets moving slowly between the inner planets, nothing that could threaten a single Dominion shuttle, let alone 300 warships. Begin approach. FX ordered. Standard formation. Broadcast the notification on all frequencies they use. The message was simple and direct. It had been used on dozens of worlds before. It explained that the planet's oceans would be harvested for the greater good of the galactic community. It gave the inhabitants 30 rotations to evacuate coastal regions. It offered transport to designated relocation zones. It promised that cooperation would be rewarded and resistance would be punished. Vex expected panic. She expected confusion. She expected desperate attempts at communication. These were the normal responses from primitive species facing their first contact with superior civilizations. What she received instead was silence. For 3 full cycles there was no response from the planet called Earth. The humans continued their normal activities. They drove their vehicles and flew their aircraft and broadcast their entertainment programs. They acted as if the 300 alien warships approaching their world did not exist. Perhaps they did not understand the message, suggested Dex's second-in-command. Brought it again, Fex ordered. In every language they use, the message went out. Again and again and again, still silence. Fex felt something she had not felt in over a century: uncertainty. Every species she had encountered responded to the notification. Some surrendered immediately, some tried to negotiate, some even attempted futile attacks against the fleet, but none had simply ignored it. Commander, a sensor officer reported, "We are detecting unusual activity on the planet's surface." FEX examined the data across the human world. Millions of individuals were moving not toward the coasts as refugees, not toward the designated evacuation points. They were moving toward military installations, toward factories, toward laboratories. What are they doing? She wondered aloud. She would learn the answer soon enough, and she would wish she had never asked. On the planet below, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and saw the lights of the alien fleet. They saw the end of everything they knew. They saw their extinction approaching in neat military formation, and they did not despair. Emergency meeting in Geneva brought together every major power on Earth. Presidents and prime ministers and generals crowded into the Great Hall of the United Nations. They had been enemies for decades. Some had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for so long that hatred felt like habit. Now, they sat together and watched the footage from orbital telescopes showing 300 alien vessels approaching their world. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the podium. She was 63 years old and had spent her life trying to bring peace to a world that seemed determined to tear itself apart. Now she faced a threat that made every human conflict in history seem meaningless. "They want our oceans," she said simply. "They have given us 30 days to leave the coastlines. After that they begin extraction. They have offered to relocate survivors to what they call mining colonies." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded immediate surrender, others called for nuclear strikes against the alien fleet. Some simply sat in silence, unable to process the end of their world. General James Morrison of the United States stood up. He was a large man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and had never lost. He did not intend to start now. We need to know what we're dealing with, he said. Has anyone attempted to communicate with them? We have sent thousands of messages, Santos replied. They do not respond. They simply repeat their notification and continue their approach. Then they are not interested in negotiation. Morrison said they see us as animals to be herded, livestock to be processed. What would you suggest? Asked the Russian president. Our weapons cannot reach their ships. Our fastest rockets would take weeks to approach them. They could destroy us from orbit without ever entering our atmosphere. It was not a pleasant smile. Let them come closer, he said. Let them get comfortable. Let them think we are weak and afraid, and then we show them what humans do when we are cornered. The debate continued for hours, but in the end there was really only one choice. Surrender meant extinction, not quick death but slow degradation. Generations of humans working as slaves in alien minds until the species simply faded away. Every leader in that room knew they could not accept that fate. Not for themselves, not for their children, not for their species. By the end of the day, the governments of Earth had agreed to something that would have seemed impossible 1 week earlier. Complete military cooperation. Every weapon, every soldier, every resource united under a single command structure with one purpose: resistance. Commander Thex watched the humans from orbit with growing impatience. The 30 rotations were nearly over and still the primitives had not begun evacuation. Her sensor teams reported strange movements on the surface, military vehicles converging on coastal cities instead of leaving them, industrial facilities increasing their output rather than shutting down. They cannot be planning to fight, her second-in-command said. Their weapons are centuries behind ours. They have nothing that can penetrate our shields. Perhaps they do not understand their situation, Fex replied. Send the first harvester to the largest ocean. Begin extraction. When they see our power, they will comply. The harvester was a massive vessel, larger than any human city. It descended through Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, what the humans called Hawaii. Its great intake systems prepared to begin the process of draining the sea. According to the harvester's calculations, it would take approximately 1 planetary year to extract all useful materials from this body of water. The humans watched it come down. Millions of them stood on beaches and hillsides and rooftops. They did not run. They did not hide. They waited. When the harvester reached an altitude of 10,000 m, every nuclear power on Earth fired at once. The United States, Russia, China, Britain, France, India, Pakistan, Israel, over 2,000 nuclear warheads rose from silos and submarines and bombers. They converged on the harvester from every direction. Fex received the warning from her tactical officers 3 seconds before impact. Multiple projectiles incoming. Primitive fission and fusion devices. Approximately 2,000 individual weapons. Raise shields, she ordered calmly. Harvester's defensive systems could handle primitive nuclear weapons. Everyone knew that the first warhead struck the harvester's shield and detonated, then the second, then 10. More than 100, then 1,000. The sky above the Pacific became a second sun. The flash was visible from space. The electromagnetic pulse disrupted communications across half the planet. The shock wave created tsunamis that killed hundreds of thousands of humans on distant shores. When the light faded, the harvester was still there, still functional but barely. The star stared at the damage reports in disbelief. The shields had held but only just 30% of the harvester systems were offline. Its primary intake mechanism was destroyed. Structural integrity had fallen to dangerous levels. 2,000 nuclear weapons. The humans had thrown everything they had at a single ship, and they had almost destroyed it. Commander, her tactical officer said quietly, if they had coordinated better, if they had achieved simultaneous detonation instead of sequential impact, the shields would have failed completely. Fex understood what this meant. The humans had come within seconds of killing a Dominion harvester with weapons the Council had dismissed as primitive toys. They had not run. They had not surrendered. They had attacked with everything they possessed. Withdraw. The harvester, she ordered. Signal Nexus Prime, we need reinforcements. Ambassador Velrix received the report. His private chambers, he read it 3 times before he fully accepted its contents. A pre-emergent species had damaged a Dominion harvester. Such a thing had not happened in over 1,000 years. Destroy them, he ordered. Destroy their cities. Destroy their military forces. Destroy everything until they submit. Commander. Fex complied. The Dominion warships began orbital bombardment of Earth's major population centers. Beams of concentrated energy fell from the sky like the judgment of angry gods. Moscow burned. Beijing burned. New York and London and Tokyo and Sydney all burned. In the first wave of attacks, over 300 million humans died, but the survivors did not surrender. General Morrison had expected the retaliation. He had prepared for it as best he could. Underground bunkers, dispersed command structures, mobile military units that never stayed in one place long enough to be targeted. The infrastructure of human civilization was devastated, but its military capability remained largely intact, and humans were learning. Every beam that fell from the sky was recorded and analyzed. Every alien weapon was studied. Scientists working in hidden laboratories began to understand the principles behind the Dominion's technology. It was advanced, but it was not magic. It followed rules, rules that could be learned, rules that could be exploited. Meanwhile, humanity struck back with every weapon it had left, not just nuclear missiles, cyber attacks against the alien fleet, communication systems, satellite swarms launched on suicide trajectories, chemical and biological weapons deployed against any alien ground forces foolish enough to land. The Dominion had expected the humans to break after the first bombardment. Instead, they became more dangerous, more coordinated, more creative. Fex requested permission to use planet-killing weapons to simply crack the Earth's crust and end the problem permanently. Veltric denied the request. The deuterium in the oceans was too valuable to waste. The humans would be subdued through conventional means. This was his second mistake. 6 months after the first bombardment, a human submarine surfaced in the Pacific. It was badly damaged. Its crew had not seen sunlight in weeks, but it carried something important, a captured piece of Dominion Technology, a fragment of the damaged harvester that had fallen into the ocean. The fragment contained a working, faster-than-light communication device. Within days, human scientists have reverse-engineered its basic principles. Within weeks, they had built a crude prototype. Within months, they had established communication links across Earth that the Dominion could not jam or intercept, and they had begun work on something else, something the Dominion had never considered possible. In a secret facility beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the greatest minds humanity had ever produced worked without rest. They were building a ship that could travel faster than light, a ship that would carry humanity's rage beyond their dying world and into the galaxy that had condemned them. They called it Prometheus. Commander Thex continued the bombardment. For 2 years, she reduced Earth's population from 8 billion to 3 billion. She destroyed every major city and every visible military installation. She thought she was winning. She was wrong. On the day Prometheus lifted off from its hidden launch facility, FEX received a final message from the planet below. It came from General Morrison, now operating from a bunker deep beneath what had once been Colorado. "We received your message 2 years ago," Morrison said. "Now we're sending a reply. You wanted our world. You wanted our oceans. You wanted our people. You took 300 million of us in the first attack, 5 billion more in the years since. We have not forgotten a single one. We will never forget. And now we are coming not to negotiate, not to surrender. We are coming to teach you what happens when you try to harvest humanity. Look to your skies, Commander. Look to your worlds. We are bringing Earth's rage to your doorstep, and we will not stop until the stars themselves learn to fear us." Thex watched Prometheus disappear into faster than light travel. She traced its trajectory. It was heading for Dominion space. She finally understood what the humans had been doing during all those months of silence. They had not been preparing to defend their world. They had been preparing to attack hers. For the first time in 300 years, Commander Thex felt something she thought she had forgotten how to feel. Fear. Captain Alina Ray stood on the bridge of Prometheus and watched the stars blur past the viewscreen. She was 34 years old. She had lost her husband in the Sydney bombardment and her parents in the destruction of Madrid. She had nothing left on Earth except hatred and a burning need for revenge. She was perfect for this mission. "How long until we reach the target?" she asked. 14 hours, replied Lieutenant Chen, her navigation officer. He was 26 and had watched Beijing burn from a refugee ship in the East China Sea. "We will emerge from faster than light. Travel approximately 10,000 km from the Dominion colony on Velrath Minor." Rays nodded. Rath Minor was a small world on the edge of Dominion space. Population of approximately 3 million. It served as a mining outpost and refueling station. According to the intelligence they had gathered from captured Dominion communication devices, it had minimal defenses. It would be humanity's first message to the galaxy. The doctrine of spite had emerged in the early months of the war. No one could identify who first wrote it down. It seemed to grow naturally from the collective consciousness of a species facing extinction. The core principle was simple. If Earth must die, then the cost of killing it would be so horrific that no species would ever attempt such a thing again. This was not about winning. The humans knew they could not defeat the Dominion. In a straight fight, they were too few, and too weak and too far behind in technology. This was about punishment. This was about teaching the galaxy that humanity was not prey. Prometheus carried 50 crew members and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. It was crude by Dominion standards. It's faster than light, drive was unstable, and its life support systems were barely adequate, but it worked, and that was all that mattered. The ship emerged from faster than light travel, exactly where Chen had predicted. The Dominion colony hung in space below them, a blue and green world that reminded Reyes painfully of Earth. She pushed the feeling aside. There was no room for mercy in the doctrine of spite. Target their orbital stations first, she ordered, then their ground defenses, then their communication facilities. What about civilian areas? Asked Lieutenant Santos, her weapons officer. He was young and still had some innocence left in him. Reyes looked at him coldly. They did not spare our civilians. We will not spare theirs. The attack lasted 3 hours. Prometheus swept through the system like an angel of death, destroying everything in its path. When the orbital defenses were gone, Reyes ordered the bombardment of population centers. The same type of attack that had destroyed Earth cities was now falling on Dominion civilians. 3 million beings died that day. Reyes watched the planet burn and felt nothing but satisfaction. Before leaving, she broadcast a message on all frequencies, the same message that would become humanity's signature throughout the war. For every human life you have taken, we will take 10 of yours. For every city you have destroyed, we will destroy 10 of yours. You wanted Earth, now you have awakened something far worse. We are coming for all of you, and we will not stop until the debt is paid. The message reached Nexus Prime. 3 days later, the Galactic Council erupted in chaos. Ambassador Felix demanded immediate action. Hunt them down, he ordered. Find their ship and destroy it. This cannot go unpunished. With respect, Ambassador Mox replied, punishment is what brought us to this point. We attacked their world without provocation. We killed billions of their people. What did you expect them to do? I expected them to die quietly like every other primitive species we have harvested. They are not like other species. Surely you can see that now. The council debated for cycles while humanity continued its campaign of terror. Prometheus was joined by 2 more ships within months, then 5 more, then 20, each one built in secret facilities on Earth or in the asteroid belt, each one crewed by survivors who had lost everything and feared nothing. The humans did not fight like any species the council had encountered before. They did not mass their forces for fleet engagements. They did not hold territory. They struck without warning and disappeared before retaliation could arrive. They targeted supply lines in communication networks and civilian populations, and they used tactics that horrified even the most hardened Dominion commanders. On the world of Kathra Prime, human forces captured a Dominion communication station. They used it to broadcast the dying screams of the station's crew across every frequency in the sector. The psychological effect was devastating. Dominion soldiers began refusing to garrison isolated outposts on the mining colony of Nexus 7, a human cargo ship was captured by Dominion forces. They thought it was attempting to surrender. When they brought it into their main hangar for processing, they discovered it was carrying a 50-megaton fusion bomb. The explosion destroyed the colony's primary processing facility and killed 8,000 Dominion workers. The humans called these tactics asymmetric warfare. The Council called them atrocities, but the labels did not matter. What mattered was that they worked back on Earth. The survivors had organized themselves into a functioning society once again, not the fractured collection of nations that had existed before. Something new, something harder. The United Earth Defense Force governed what remained of human civilization with one purpose above all others: building more ships, training more soldiers, finding new ways to hurt the enemy. Snort's General Morrison had died in a Dominion strike 6 months into the war. His replacement was Admiral Yuki Tanaka, a woman who had watched Sydney boil. When she was 12 years old, her grandparents had died in that attack. She had dedicated every moment of her life since then to one goal: making the Dominion pay. Under her leadership, the human fleet grew from 20 ships to 50. From 50 to 100, each one was better than the last. Human scientists had fully reverse-engineered Dominion technology and were beginning to improve upon it. The latest vessels could match Dominion warships in speed and firepower, but Tanaka was not satisfied with equality. She wanted superiority. "We need allies," she told her command staff. "The Dominion is not the only power in this galaxy. There are 11 other species on the Council. Some of them voted against our destruction. We need to find them and bring them to our side." Intelligence operatives were dispatched across the galaxy. They made contact with the Gentle Ones first. Ambassador Mox had been removed from his position after speaking against the human harvest. He was living in exile on a remote world when a human shuttle landed outside his dwelling. The operatives brought a message from Admiral Tanaka. Simple proposition: help us and we will. Remember, stand against us and we will. Remember that too. Moxon spent his life advocating for peace and understanding between species, the idea of allying with beings who were burning colonies and broadcasting the screams of the dying horrified him. But he also understood something that the rest of the Council refused to see. The humans were going to win, not through superior numbers or technology, through sheer determination, through the willingness to do whatever was necessary, through a rage that would not stop until every wrong had been avenged. Mox agreed to help. Within a year, the Gentle Ones had secretly withdrawn their support from the Dominion war effort. They were followed by the Hollow, who had grown uncomfortable with the mounting atrocities on both sides. Then the Collective, who calculated that the cost of the war was exceeding any possible benefit. The Galactic Council began to fracture. Velrix watched his coalition crumbling and could not understand why. His species had ruled this galaxy for millions of years. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had faced challenges far greater than a single primitive species with a handful of ships, but he had never faced anything like humanity. On the 5th anniversary of the first bombardment, Admiral Tanaka broadcast message to all of Dominion space. Her face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. She spoke calmly and clearly. 5 years ago you came to our world and told us we would be harvested You said we were animals. You said we had no value except as resources. You killed 5 billion of us today. We have killed 50 million of you. This is not enough. It will never be enough, but it is a start. We are coming for your home world. We are coming for your leaders. We are coming for everyone who voted to destroy us. You started this war. We will finish it. Velrix dismissed the message as propaganda. The humans did not have the forces to threaten the Dominion home world. Their fleet was still tiny compared to his, but his advisors showed him the projections. Human ship production was doubling every 6 months. Their technology was advancing at a rate the Council had never seen. If current trends continued, humanity would have numerical and technological superiority within a decade. For the first time, Velrix considered the possibility that he had made a mistake. Not a moral mistake. He still believed the humans were inferior beings who deserved their fate. A strategic mistake. He had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Doctrine of spite was working exactly as designed. The cost of attacking humanity was becoming too high to bear. Colony worlds that had supported the war were now demanding peace. Dominion citizens were questioning why their children were dying to harvest the oceans of a primitive world on the edge of the galaxy. The tide was turning and humanity had not forgotten a single death. They were keeping score, recording every name, every city, every atrocity. They would settle the account in full. It was only a matter of time. 10 years after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's sky, a human fleet emerged from faster than light travel. Above the Dominion home world, 200 vessels carrying 50,000 soldiers and enough weapons to crack a planet. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to deliver a message. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Vengeance. She was 47 years old now. Gray had begun to appear in her black hair. Lines of stress and grief had marked her face, but her eyes were still the same, cold and focused, and filled with a rage that would never fade. Status report, she said quietly. The Dominion fleet is mobilizing. Commander Reyes replied. Elena Reyes had become Tanaka's most trusted officer. Over the years, she commanded the battle group that had destroyed 17 Dominion colonies. Her reputation among enemy forces was legendary. They called her the Ghost of Sydney. How many ships? Approximately 500. They will reach defensive positions within 2 hours. Tanaka nodded. The Dominion still had numerical superiority in their home system, but numbers were not everything. The humans had spent 10 years learning how to fight these beings. They knew their tactics. They knew their weaknesses. They knew their fears. Signal the fleet, Tanaka ordered. Execute Operation Homecoming. Human ships did not advance toward the Dominion home world. Instead, they began broadcasting. Every screen on the planet below lit up with the same image. Admiral Tanaka's face, speaking in perfect Dominion language that she had learned specifically for this moment. Citizens of the Dominion, she said, 10 years ago, your leader sent a fleet to my world. They told us we were animals. They told us our oceans would be harvested and our people would be slaves. We were given 30 days to accept our fate. Today I give you the same courtesy. In 30 days, if your leaders have not surrendered unconditionally, we will begin the systematic destruction of your civilization. every colony, every space station, every ship, and finally this world. You have 30 days to decide if your leaders are worth dying for. The broadcast ended. The human fleet withdrew to the edge of the system and waited on the Dominion home world. Panic spread. For millions of years, no enemy had threatened this planet. It was the heart of their civilization, the seat of their government, the home of their oldest families and most sacred sites. The idea that primitives from a backwater world could threaten it was unthinkable. And yet the human fleet was real, and everyone remembered what had happened to Velrath Minor and all the other worlds that had felt humanity's rage. Ambassador Velrix addressed the council. In an emergency session, his voice was steady, but those who knew him could see the fear behind his eyes. They are bluffing, he insisted. They do not have the forces to take our home world. Their fleet is inferior to ours. If they attack, we will destroy them. Will we? Asked Ambassador Urex of the collective. The hive mind had quietly withdrawn from the war 2 years earlier. They had calculated the probabilities and concluded that the Dominion could not win. Our projections suggest a different outcome. Your projections are flawed. Collective has never understood warfare. Perhaps, but we understand mathematics. The humans have destroyed 47 of your colonies in the past decade. They have killed over 200 million of your people. They have captured or reverse engineered most of your military technology. Their fleet grows stronger every year while yours grows weaker. At what point do you acknowledge that you have lost this war? Velikri slammed his primary manipulator on the table. We have not lost anything. These humans are vermin. They will be exterminated like the pests they are. You said the same thing 10 years ago. Urix replied calmly, and yet here we are. The debate continued, but the dynamics had shifted dramatically. The Dominion's allies were abandoning them. One by one, the Hollow had stopped providing resources 3 years earlier. The collective had withdrawn entirely. Even the most loyal members of the coalition were questioning whether this war was worth continuing. Meanwhile, the human fleet waited at the edge of the system. They did not attack. They did not advance. They simply waited and watched and let fear do its work. On Earth, the war had transformed human society beyond recognition. The fractured nations of the past had merged into a single, unified government. The endless conflicts over resources and ideology had been replaced by a shared purpose that transcended everything else. Survival, revenge, victory. The 3 billion humans who remained were harder than any generation that had come before. Children grew up learning to build weapons and pilot ships and kill aliens. Art and music and literature all reflected the war. The old religions had faded, replaced by a new faith in human resilience and the certainty of eventual triumph. Some called it madness, a species that had sacrificed everything that made life worth living in exchange for the ability to destroy. But the humans did not care what others thought. They had been forged in fire, and they would forge the galaxy in turn. Admiral Tanaka spent the 30 days studying intelligence reports and coordinating with her allies. Ambassador Mox had been instrumental in building a coalition of species who wanted to see the Dominion fall. The gentle ones provided intelligence and diplomatic support. The Hollow contributed technology and resources. Even the Collective had begun quietly sharing information about Dominion defenses. The galaxy was turning against its oldest power, and humanity was leading the revolution. On the 28th day, Velrix made a final attempt to rally support. He broadcast an address to all council worlds calling for unity against the human threat. They are savages, he declared. They have no culture, no honor, no respect for the laws that have governed this galaxy for millions of years. If we allow them to triumph, everything we have built will be destroyed. Every species will be at risk. We must stand together against this common enemy. The response was not what he expected. The Hollow publicly announced their support for humanity. The Dominion started this war without justification. Their ambassador declared, they have reaped what they sowed. We will not die to protect their arrogance. The collective followed within hours. Then the mining guilds, then the trade federations, then a dozen smaller factions and organizations who had calculated that the Dominion was no longer worth supporting. By the 30th day, the Dominion stood alone. Admiral Tanaka received reports of political chaos on the enemy home world. Protests had erupted in major cities. Citizens were demanding that their leaders surrender rather than face destruction. Some military units had begun refusing orders. The social fabric of Dominion civilization was tearing itself apart. They are collapsing from within, Commander Reyes observed. We may not need to fire a single shot. We will fire anyway, Tanaka replied. They need to understand that surrender is not enough. There must be consequences. On the 31st day, the human fleet advanced. They did not head for the home world. Instead, they targeted the Dominion's outer colonies. 3 worlds burned in a single day, then 3 more. Then 3 more. Each time Tanaka broadcast the same message. This is the price of threatening humanity. Every world your leaders refuse to surrender, another colony dies. The choice is yours. The Dominion fleet attempted to intervene. They outnumbered the humans almost 3 to 1, but the humans had learned tactics the Dominion had never seen. Hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, using sensor ghosts and decoys, suicide charges that sacrificed individual ships to destroy enemy formations. And they had one advantage the Dominion could not match. They were not afraid to die. Dominion soldiers fought to protect their civilization. They had families and futures and dreams. They wanted to survive. Human soldiers fought for revenge. They had already lost everything. Death held no terror for people who had watched their worlds burn. The battle lasted 12 days. When it ended, the Dominion fleet had been reduced by half. Humanity had lost only 30 ships. Velrix finally understood this was not a war he could win. The humans were not just enemies. They were a force of nature, a storm of rage that would not stop until everything in its path was destroyed. He had one option left. On the 43rd day, after Tanaka's ultimatum, ambassadors broadcast a message to the human fleet. His voice was broken. His 4 eyes would not meet the camera. We surrender, he said simply, unconditionally, as you demanded. Tanaka received the message on the Bridge of Vengeance. Her officers waited for her response. Some expected celebration, others expected mercy. They received neither. Unacceptable, Tanaka replied. Surrender was the option 30 days ago. That offer has expired. Now we We'll discuss terms and you will accept. Whatever terms we choose, she cut the communication and turned to her staff. Contact Ambassador Mox, tell him to prepare the delegation. We are going to end this war, but we are going to end it on our terms. The stars had learned to fear humanity. Now they would learn to obey. 20 years had passed since the Harvest Armada first appeared in Earth's sky. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime looked exactly as it had on that day. The same ancient walls, the same 12 seats arranged in a circle, the same solemn atmosphere of power and permanence. But everything had changed. Admiral Yuki Tanaka walked into the chamber without escort. She wore the black uniform of the United Earth Defense Force. No medals, no decorations, just the simple insignia of her rank. She did not need symbols to demonstrate her power. Everyone in the galaxy knew what she had done, what she was capable of doing. The 12 ambassadors watched her approach the central podium. Some looked at her with fear, some with hatred, a few with something approaching respect. None could look away. Tanaka stood in silence for a long moment. She studied each face in turn. Ambassador Velry sat in the Dominion seat. He had aged badly in the past decade. His once proud bearing had crumbled. His fore dull and lifeless. He had sent 300 ships to harvest a primitive world. He had expected no resistance. Now his civilization lay in ruins and his people lived under human occupation. Ambassador Mock sat in the seat reserved for the gentle ones. He had worked closely with humanity throughout the war. His species had provided intelligence and diplomatic support at critical moments. Some called him a traitor. He preferred to think of himself as a realist. The other ambassadors represented species that had tried to stay neutral. They had watched the conflict from the sidelines, calculating odds and waiting to see which side would triumph. Now they waited to learn their fate. You know why I am here, Tanaka said finally. Her voice was calm and cold. 20 years ago, this council voted to harvest my world. You classified us as animals. You said we had no rights, no value. You were wrong. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air around her. Earth before the war, blue oceans and green continents and white clouds, cities filled with light and life, 8 billion people going about their daily existence. Then the images changed. The bombardments, the burning cities, the millions of corpses, the vast empty spaces where populations had once lived, the 3 billion survivors who had been forced to remake themselves into something hard and terrible just to survive. You killed 5 billion of my people, Tanaka continued. You destroyed our cities, our culture, our history. You thought you were exterminating vermin. Instead, you were creating the most dangerous enemy this galaxy has ever known. New images appeared. Dominion colonies burning, Dominion fleets shattered, Dominion worlds under human occupation, the cost of the war displayed in stark and brutal detail. We killed 230 million of your people. Tanaka said, we destroyed 47 of your colonies. We broke your fleet and occupied your home world, and we are not done. Velrich spoke for the first time. His voice was barely a whisper. What more do you want from us? We have surrendered. We have accepted your occupation. We have nothing left. Tanaka turned to face him directly. You have nothing left because you chose to fight. You had every opportunity to end this War, you could have withdrawn after the first attack failed, you could have negotiated after we destroyed Velrath. Minor, you could have surrendered when we reached your home world. Instead, you chose pride over survival, and now you will pay the price. She activated another display. This one showed documents, treaties, agreements, the entire legal framework that had governed the Galactic Council for millions of years. These are the laws you created. Tanaka said, the laws that declared my species to be non-persons, the laws that allowed you to harvest our world without consequence, the laws that protected you from accountability. Today these laws end. She produced a data crystal and placed it on the podium. This is the Tanaka Accords, the new framework that will govern this galaxy going forward. You will read it, you will sign it, and you will comply with every provision it contains. Ambassador Urix of the Collective spoke up, and if we refuse, Tanaka smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The human fleet remains in orbit around Nexus Prime. We have 50,000 ships now, enough to destroy every world represented in this chamber. If you refuse to sign, we will begin systematic elimination of your species, starting with yours, Ambassador. The silence in the chamber was absolute. You would commit genocide, Urix asked. You attempted genocide against us. You killed 5 billion of my people. Did you think there would be no consequences? Did you think we would simply forgive and forget? Tanaka picked up the data crystal again. The accords are actually quite reasonable. They establish humanity as a permanent member of this council with full voting rights. They require reparations from the Dominion to rebuild Earth. They create new protections for pre-emergent species to prevent anything like this from happening again. They establish human oversight of council military operations for the next century, and they require every species that voted for our destruction to formally apologize. She looked at Velrix, including you, personally, on a broadcast that will reach every world in the galaxy. Velrix's manipulators trembled. You cannot humiliate us like this. We are an ancient civilization. We have our dignity. You had your dignity. You lost it when you decided to murder 8 billion people for their ocean water. Now you have a choice. Accept humiliation and survive, or refuse and watch your species join the extinction list. The chamber erupted in arguments and protests. Some ambassadors demanded time to consult with their governments. Others tried to negotiate modifications to the accords. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Tanaka waited patiently. She had expected this reaction. She had prepared for it. After 2 hours of chaos, Ambassador Mock stood up. I will sign, he announced. The gentle ones accept the Tanaka Accords. We should have stopped this war before it started. We failed. This is the consequence. His signature appeared on the document. The collective signed next, then the hollow, then one by one the other species fell into line. They had no choice. The human fleet waited in orbit. The human soldiers waited on their streets. The human empire waited to be born. Finally, only Velrix remained unsigned. Tanaka walked over to his seat. She stood directly in front of him, close enough to touch. Her eyes met his 4 eyes. Without blinking, you sent Commander FX to harvest my world, she said softly. You watched as she bombarded our cities. You celebrated when the death toll reached 1 billion. then 2 billion, then 5 billion. You thought you were untouchable. You thought your power would protect you. Forever you were wrong. She placed the data crystal on the arm of his chair. Sign now or I will give the order to begin glassing your home world, starting with the city where your family lives. Velric stared at her. He saw no mercy in her eyes, no room for negotiation, no possibility of escape. He saw only the cold certainty of a predator that had finally caught its prey. His manipulator moved. His signature appeared on the document. The Tanaka Accords are now in effect. Tanaka announced to the chamber, a new era has begun. The old order is dead. In its place rises something different. Something forged in fire and blood and rage. She turned to leave the chamber. At the doorway she paused and looked back. Remember this moment. Remember what happens when you try to destroy a species that refuses to die. Remember the cost of your arrogance. And remember that humanity is watching. Always watching. If anyone ever tries to repeat what the Dominion did, we will respond the same way, only faster, only harder, only more completely. She walked out without another word. Galaxy had changed forever. The species that had once been dismissed as primitive animals now ruled an empire. The civilization that had tried to harvest them now paid tribute and apologized for its crimes. The balance of power that had endured for millions of years had been shattered in a single generation, and on a scarred and wounded Earth, 3 billion survivors looked up at the stars with new eyes. They had lost their innocence. They had lost their optimism. They had lost 5 billion of their brothers and sisters, but they had gained something too. They had gained the knowledge that they would never be prey again. The monuments were built in the years that followed, one for each of the 5 billion dead, their names carved in stone that would endure for millennia, a reminder to future generations of what had been lost and what had been achieved. Admiral Tanaka visited the memorials often in her final years. She would walk among the endless rows of names and remember the people who had died, the families who had burned, the cities that had fallen. She would remember the rage that had driven her across the galaxy, the terrible things she had done in the name of revenge. She never regretted any of it. On her deathbed, her grandchildren asked her what lesson they should take from the war. She thought for a long moment before answering. Never start a fight with humans, she said. We may not always win, but we never stop, we never forget, and we never forgive. She closed her eyes for the last time. The stars that had once looked down on Earth with contempt now looked with fear and respect, and the certain knowledge that somewhere in the darkness humanity was watching, ready to respond, ready to fight, ready to burn the universe itself if that was what survival required. Earth's rage had shattered the stars. The Galactic Council had learned too late, and humanity had taken its place among the powers of the cosmos, not as servants or slaves or resources to be harvested, but as the species that had taught the galaxy what it truly meant to fear.